Prologue, Gilbard, the Archlegate, stands at the summit of Wormhead overlooking Torwyn, reflecting on his age and the political changes in the kingdom. As he speaks with Sanctan Agelrath, the High Legate, it becomes clear that Sanctan is dissatisfied with the weakening authority of the Draconate and Gilbard's unwillingness to take more aggressive action against the growing influence of the guilds. Sanctan is frustrated by Gilbard's belief in a prophecy about the return of dragons and the Ministry's eventual rise. Tensions escalate when Sanctan suggests that they take control by force. Gilbard rejects this, but as he tries to dismiss Sanctan's defiance, he is struck by a blow from behind. It is revealed that Sanctan has orchestrated Gilbard's downfall, with Ansel, the Knight Commander, killing the Archlegate. As Gilbard lies dying, Sanctan claims his power and the future of Torwyn, with Gilbard's cat Tapfoot now in his possession. Part 1. The Steel. In Chapter 1, Ansel is plagued by recurring dreams and guilt over his role in Gilbard's assassination, which he now realizes was orchestrated by Sanctan for personal power. Waking late, Ansel receives a visit from Legate Kinloth, who informs him that Sanctan has summoned him. As Ansel prepares, he reflects on his strained position under Sanctan's influence. The Archlegate, still maintaining a facade of calm, orders Ansel to lead a mission against the guilds, but assigns him under the command of Marshal Sirona, which Ansel resents. During their walk in the overgrown temple gardens, Ansel sees the body of a woman hung from a tree, a grim reminder of Sanctan's brutal methods. Ulstrom warns Ansel that Sanctan plans to use him as fodder, and though Ansel dismisses the threat, he realizes he is walking a dangerous path. He resolves to focus on the war, unsure of his fate and the promise he made to Ulstrom. In Chapter 2, Conall rides eastward, feeling both relieved and uneasy as he leaves Fort Carven behind, still haunted by the demon's whispers and the burden of his mission. His thoughts are consumed by his mother, Lady Rosomon, and the dangerous task Senmonthus has placed on him to kill her. Despite knowing that running to her might endanger her further, he feels he has no other choice but to continue. As he journeys with Captain Draga and the Mantid Battalion, he's isolated, feared, and increasingly vulnerable. They reach an abandoned farmstead reflecting the Ministry's destructive reach. Conall, struggling with his inner demons, reaches a ferry but finds it missing. He's forced into a rowboat with Draga's men and eventually arrives at a Viper Battalion camp. Marshal Sonheld offers Conall a chance to fight, despite his condition, to stop the Ministry's forces from aiding the Archlegate. Conall decides to join them, keeping his presence secret from his mother to protect her from further danger. In Chapter 3, Rosomon Hawkspur rides south toward the web, determined to save her daughter Tiretta from the threats surrounding her. Despite warnings from her companions, Cassian and Ianto, she refuses to turn back, knowing the danger Tiretta faces. As they approach the web, Rosomon is filled with unease, recalling the threats made against her daughter. She reflects on her past mistakes and her father's legacy, feeling the weight of responsibility. The Web City, once great, is now in ruins, guarded by stormhulks and mercenaries. Inside, Rosomon is met by Cara Hallowhill, who demands that she come alone to meet with the Guildmaster. Rosomon, unwilling to leave her daughter's fate uncertain, agrees to meet but insists on knowing Tiretta's condition first. Her companions, worried for her safety, are left behind as she follows Cara, preparing for whatever awaits within the guild's lair. In Chapter 4, Tiretta regains some clarity after days of being drugged with the red drop. She recalls the brutal death of her panther, Cat, and her own emotional devastation. Now chained and drugged in her cell, Tiretta fights to clear her mind and regain control of her powers. A bird brings a small glimmer of hope, allowing Tiretta to focus on a pyre stone and use her powers to escape. She kills 2 mercenaries and frees herself, taking their keys to release her manacles. As she stumbles through the corridors, she encounters an artificer, whom she nearly kills before realizing her humanity. After questioning him, Tiretta learns that her mother, Lady Rosomon, has come to bargain with Cara Hallowhill. Fueled by anger, Tiretta heads towards her mother's location, determined to confront Cara and stop her manipulations. In Chapter 5, Cara negotiates with Sibylla over 2 masterfully crafted daggers, ultimately paying more than originally agreed upon. Afterward, Hessa warns her that Rosomon won't wait forever, prompting Cara to prepare for a tense meeting. Inside, Rosomon stands stoically by the fire, demanding to see her daughter Tiretta. Cara proposes an alliance to defeat the Ministry in exchange for Tiretta's release, offering a treaty that grants the Hallow Hills power over the guilds. Rosomon rejects the offer, pressing for her daughter's immediate return. As tensions rise, Torwyn bursts into the room, transformed into a beastly rage. In a chaotic moment, Kara threatens Rosomon with her own life, but Hessa is killed when Kara impulsively throws a pyre stone-infused dagger. Torwyn, still enraged, nearly kills Kara, but Rosomon intervenes, convincing her daughter to spare Kara for their mutual survival. Kara agrees to the deal, though her feelings of guilt and isolation linger. In Chapter 6, Ansel has a tender moment with Grace, who is unaware of the danger he faces as he prepares to leave. He tells her he must go on a mission, unsure of when or if he will return. Despite his assurances, Grace's anger and sorrow show through, and Ansel feels guilty for leaving her behind. He seeks comfort in knowing that Legate Kinloth will look after her. As Ansel prepares to depart, he encounters his brother, Reginwulf, who expresses concern about Ansel's doubts and loyalty to the ministry. Their conversation is tense, with Ansel asserting his commitment despite his internal conflict. Reginwulf warns Ansel to remain firm in his resolve or it will cost him. Ansel leaves with Falkar, joining a group of ministry soldiers marching north to face the guilds. Though they march in unity, Ansel questions the true enemy and the price of war. In Chapter 7, Fulren struggles to control the overwhelming voices in his head, nearly succumbing to their chaotic influence. He is guided by Lysander, who urges him to assert control over the necroglyph at his neck, a source of immense power. Fulren battles the darkness, using his past pain and anger to focus, eventually managing to quiet the voices and gain control. He finds himself in a barren, dreamlike landscape, face to face with a crow, which represents the malevolent force trying to claim him. The crow offers him power in exchange for his submission, but Fulren refuses, asserting his will and declaring himself the master. After overcoming the crow, Fulren returns to reality, where Lysander and Verlin witness his success. Fulren tests his newfound control over the necroglyph, feeling its power surge within him. Lysander reveals a new set of mechanical limbs and a blade, signaling that the real work is just beginning. In Chapter 8, Rosomon and her companions, including Cassian and Ianto, continue their journey north, reflecting on the recent bargain with the Hallow Hills. Ianto expresses concern over trusting the Webwainers, but Rosomon defends her decision, believing it's the only way to defeat the Ministry. They are joined by scouts reporting that the Corvus and Griffin battalions are mobilizing to block their advance at the River Mordant crossing. Rosomon decides to camp and inform Guildmaster Alexig of their plan. During the night, Rosomon tends to her daughter Torwyn, who is still recovering from the effects of the red drop and her wild transformation. Torwyn struggles with the changes inside her, feeling disconnected from herself and her family. Rosomon reassures her, encouraging her to rise to her responsibilities, but Torwyn remains uncertain. The chapter ends with Rosomon contemplating the inevitable changes ahead, knowing nothing will ever be the same again. In Chapter 9, Ansel and Falkar arrive at the military camp after a 2-day journey. They meet with Marshal Sirona, who has a plan to ambush the guilds as they march toward Alamford. Sirona insists on waiting at the crossroads to lure the guilds in, while Kagan Turswell of the Griffin Battalion suggests destroying the bridge to cut off their retreat. Ansel disagrees with both strategies, proposing a more tactical position in the woods, but Sirona refuses to split her forces. Tensions rise as Sirona reveals her desire for revenge against Rosomon Hawkspur, whom she blames for the deaths at Oakhelm. After the meeting, Ansel shares a moment with Falkar, expressing guilt over their roles in the Draconate's dark deeds. Falkar confesses his doubts and regrets, particularly over a mission where he helped abduct a family, possibly connected to Ulstrom's family. The chapter ends with Ansel feeling the weight of his past actions. In Chapter 10, Torwyn and her mother, Rosomon, arrive at the guild's encampment, where Torwyn is astonished to see the army's growth since her departure. They meet with key guild leaders, including Alexig Marlock and Mauger, and discuss plans for their next move. Marshal Rollin reports that Ministry forces are entrenched at Alamford, making a battle inevitable. After debating several options, Rosomon decides to cross at Alamford despite the risks, as there is no other way forward. Tensions rise when Kira Hallowhill arrives with her forces, and Rosomon proposes an alliance with the Hallowhills to turn the Ministry's ambush against them. Kira, while begrudgingly agreeing to the plan, suggests reaching out to Ulstrom for help in infiltrating the Anvil. Torwyn, distrustful of Kira, insists on accompanying her to ensure her mother's safety. Rosomon agrees, and they prepare to face the dangers ahead, hoping that Ulstrom's aid will turn the tide in their favor. In Chapter 11, Fulren adjusts to his new prosthetics, including a metal arm and legs, and tests his strength and abilities with a sword crafted by Lysander. After a brief but intense sparring match, Fulren gains control over his newfound power, using the necroglyph to fuel his weapons. Lysander then introduces him to the ancient mage Cornelium Obec, who has been hidden away in a decrepit state for 1,000 years. Fulren is shocked to discover Obec is alive, despite the rumors of his death, and realizes the magnitude of Lysander's actions in bringing him into their midst. Lysander admits that Obec is no longer a threat, but Fulren and Verlin are apprehensive about the consequences of harboring such a dangerous figure. As they prepare to leave, Lysander urges Fulren to use his strength to win the upcoming war. Fulren, now a changed man, sets out with Verlin, unsure of what lies ahead. In Chapter 12, Kira leads her Hallow Hill forces toward Ulumford, but she feels increasingly isolated from her people, who are wary and distrustful of her leadership. As they set up camp, Kira overhears a conversation among her webwainers expressing doubt about her authority and the recent shifts in allegiances. Some wainers question why they are fighting for Rosomon Hawkspur after previously aligning with the Ministry. Kara grapples with her position as guildmaster, doubting whether she truly deserves the role, and struggles with how her followers view her. When she attempts to rally her troops with a speech, it initially falls flat, but she escalates the situation by demonstrating the power of the Stormhulks and Pyrestone weapons. Eventually, her words stir some loyalty, and a few webwainers, including Rodita and Vikmar, pledge their support. Kira realizes she has gained their respect, but Tyretta's cold gaze from the shadows leaves her unsettled. In Chapter 13, Conall's group, including Stead and Donan, make camp in an old quarry, where Conall reconnects with his old companions. Stead and Donan explain their journey and Tyretta's mission, mentioning she went back to Castletig, leaving them with mixed emotions. Conall's focus shifts when news arrives that the Raptor and Auroch battalions are 2 days away from the quarry, threatening his mother's forces. Marshal Sunheld devises a plan to block their advance at a choke point in a valley. Conall suggests blowing 2 Infernium plants to trap the enemy, and Donan volunteers to plant the explosives, having experience with munitions. Despite some hesitation, the group prepares for the mission. Stead insists on joining them, and despite the risks, Conall remains confident. The team sets off to collect explosives from a supply dump, aware that the mission will be perilous, but determined to succeed. In Chapter 14, Ansel and his troops await the guild forces across the bridge, feeling the tension of an inevitable battle. Ansel, accompanied by Falkar, prepares for the clash, but an unusual hesitation from the guilds makes him uneasy. As the guilds advance, Ansel orders his troops to hold the barricade. The situation becomes critical when the guilds, seemingly aware of an ambush, hesitate to cross. Ansel's forces are attacked from the north by unseen enemies, and Marshal Turswell pushes for a retreat, but Ansel insists on holding the position. As the Stormhulks arrive from the south, Ansel's position becomes untenable. In the ensuing chaos, Ansel faces off against a skilled warrior but ultimately hesitates to kill her, sparing her life. As the battle progresses, Ansel is confronted by Malgar, a fierce enemy swordsman. Despite his best efforts, Ansel is overpowered and ultimately succumbs to defeat, drowning in the river. In Chapter 15, Rosomon surveys the aftermath of the battle, reflecting on the sacrifices made by her people. She is haunted by worries for her daughter, Tyretta, who is heading toward the anvil but reminds herself that Tyretta is strong and capable. Despite the victory, Rosomon is troubled by the heavy toll of war. As she inspects the battlefield, she encounters Marshal Serona, captured and awaiting her fate. Their tense exchange reveals Serona's arrogance, but Rosomon chooses to focus on the bigger picture, securing peace for Torwyn and holding those responsible for its suffering accountable. Later, Rosomon meets with Marshal Falco, who pledges his support, and her daughter Emily Marlock, who defies her father's wishes to join the battle. A messenger arrives with a letter from the Archlegate offering a parley. Rosomon, undeterred by the danger, decides to meet him, setting the stage for further negotiations. In Chapter 16, Kara and Tyretta make their way to the anvil, navigating through enemy territory with increasing tension between them. As they near the city, Kara's anxiety grows, especially when they encounter a locked gate. Tyretta opens it, allowing them to proceed toward their goal, But things take a turn when they are trapped in a cellar by a foreman Kara had hoped would help them find Ulstrom. Feeling betrayed, Kira and Tyretta argue, with tensions flaring between them. Just as things escalate, they are confronted by Ulstrom, who reveals himself to be the one who set them up. Despite their animosity, Kira's plan to trust him has backfired, leaving them in a precarious position. Ulstrom's smugness suggests he's been orchestrating their moves all along, and the chapter ends with his arrival, hinting at more complicated betrayals ahead. In Chapter 17, Tyretta and Kara meet Ulstrom in a secret, opulent chamber after being led through his labyrinthine lair. Kara and Ulstrom exchange tension-filled words, with Kara apologizing for past betrayals, but Ulstrom demands a price for his help, the safe return of his family, whom Sanctan has taken. Ulstrom offers crucial information about the resistance within the Anvil, but reveals that finding his family is a challenge, as only Sanctan knows their whereabouts. Tyretta reluctantly agrees to take on the task of rescuing Ulstrom's family, while Kiara is sent back to Lady Rosomon to seek her mother's support for the rebellion. As Kira leaves, Tyretta and Ulstrom discuss past mistakes, and he reveals his deep regrets over his choices, especially in regard to his family. Tyretta is tasked with connecting the Hawkspurs to the Resistance while waiting for the signal to act. In Chapter 18, Fulren and Verlin travel through a war-torn landscape, heading toward Fulren's mother while reflecting on his newfound powers and the strange, dark urges within him. They encounter a refugee camp near Kesselteg, where Fulren struggles to control his emotions and the necroglyph within him. He is tempted by rage after hearing about the destruction of Wyke and the death of Lancelin Jagdor. When Fulren's anger erupts, his mechanical limbs become a terrifying sight to the refugees, causing panic. Despite this, he resists the urge to harm them, realizing the danger of his unchecked power. Verlin urges Fulren to focus on their mission, suggesting they seek his mother for help. Fulren decides to investigate a town taken by an armiger battalion, wanting to understand his abilities better. Despite Verlin's objections, he insists they move forward, determined to learn what he's capable of. In Chapter 19, Conall leads a mission to destroy an Infernium facility critical to the Guild's power. As they set the charges, Donan takes charge, expertly placing explosives, while Conall tries to manage the tension within his team, particularly with Stead's resistance. After successfully planting the explosives, they realize the facility they're targeting is only a storehouse, not the refinery. They quickly move toward the actual refinery, but encounter armiger troopers on the valley floor, forcing them to cross a bridge stealthily. Once across, they set the charges and narrowly escape an attack from the Orok battalion. The explosion from the Infernium facility is spectacular, signaling success. Returning to camp, Conall receives reluctant praise from Marshal Sonheld, and he's asked to assist in further missions. The team, exhausted but successful, sits quietly, reflecting on their mission, with Conall acknowledging Donan's bravery and Stead's sarcastic remarks. In Chapter 20, Rosomon arrives at the gates of the Anvil, where she anticipates a meeting with her nephew Sanctan. The atmosphere is tense as they approach the city, and Rosomon's concerns about its defenses are voiced by Olexig. Upon arriving at the eastern gate, a landship carriage emerges with 2 drakes, signaling Sanctan's invitation. Rosomon, accompanied by Malgar, Cassian, and Ianto, enters the carriage where Sanctan awaits, dressed in lavish attire. The conversation is strained as Rosomon confronts Sanctan about his role in the nation's destruction, and he justifies his actions as a mission to guide Torwyn. Tensions escalate, but Rosomon remains resolute in her refusal to surrender. She threatens to kill him if necessary. As she exits the carriage, the gates close behind her, and she prepares to face the coming battle, determined to defeat her nephew and his tyrannical rule. In Chapter 21, Kira returns to the guild camp, where she faces a cold reception from the Hallowhill Webwainers, especially from Emily. She seeks out Lady Rosomon, who is preparing for the next steps in their fight. Kara delivers the news about Ulstrom's assistance, but also the condition. Ulstrom will help only if his family is freed. Rosomon, frustrated by the uncertainty, leads Kara to the prisoner stockade, where they speak to Brother Lugard, a drake who refuses to help. However, a second drake, a scarred knight who once swore to free Ulstrom's family, offers to guide them. Rosomon trusts Kara's judgment and assigns her the task of rescuing the family. Despite Kara's hesitation, Rosomon insists, with Cassian's watchful presence ensuring compliance. The chapter ends with Kara reluctantly agreeing to the mission, now tasked with navigating the dangerous waters of trust and deception. In Chapter 22, Conall's group marches north, knowing they're facing an imminent battle against 2 battalions. Conall struggles with doubt and the fear of his curse manifesting as they approach their destination. When they stop to camp, a scout reports that the Phoenix Battalion is reinforcing the anvil by using a transport line. Sonheld plans to sabotage the line, but Conall suggests targeting a depot halfway between the cities instead. He proposes creating a diversion to allow a small unit to infiltrate and plant explosives at the Hawkspur Eyrie, causing a significant disruption. Sonheld approves, and Conall is tasked with leading the assault. After briefing his team, Conall is met with mixed reactions, particularly from Stead, who disapproves of their reckless approach. Nonetheless, they prepare for the mission, with Conall starting to feel more like a leader, even as he grapples with the consequences of his inner struggles and past actions. In Chapter 23, Fulren grapples with his growing internal struggle and the fear of the monster within him as he heads toward a settlement. His apprehension intensifies as he senses the Tigress Battalion stationed there, but he is determined to prove his strength. When he reaches the settlement, he silently kills a sentry and then attacks a tavern filled with Tigress troopers. A violent battle ensues, with Fulren using his Pyrestone blade and newfound power to slaughter the soldiers. The fight triggers a transformation, as his body melds with his artificial limbs, and he becomes an unstoppable force. After the chaos, Fulren leaves the tavern and watches a murder of crows fly over the town, signaling his victory. Upon returning to the wagon, he reveals to Verlin that he has embraced his new power, though she warns him of its dangerous sorcery. Fulren, however, is resolute, believing he is now the weapon she wanted. In Chapter 24, Tyrreda grows frustrated with the lack of progress while waiting in a safe house for Ulstrom's resistance to make contact. After 2 days of isolation, a man arrives, sent by Ulstrom to escort her to a secret meeting. Tyrreda, wary but intrigued, follows him through the anvil, observing new ministry militias and sensing the growing tension among the city's people. They reach a basement where a small group of rebels awaits, including Vachelm, an actuary who once worked for her mother. Despite initial hostility from the group, Tyrreda rallies them, emphasizing the need to fight back against the ministry. Vachelm, revealing scars from his mistreatment, suggests rescuing a group of Titan Guard prisoners held in a heavily guarded old jail. Tyrreda seizes the idea, motivating the group to plan a prison break. The chapter ends with the rebels agreeing to join forces, marking the beginning of their action. In Chapter 25, Ansel leads a small group on horseback, heading north towards Gravedell. He struggles with the burden of his sins, knowing his actions may have caused irreparable damage, particularly regarding Ulstrom's family. Along the journey, he feels the weight of the secret he's carrying and the unease of traveling with Kara, a sorceress, and Cassian, a deadly swordwright. They reach a devastated town, burned by the Draconate for sedition, and Ansel is haunted by the destruction. The group continues to a farmhouse where they take shelter for the night. As they eat and converse, Ansel is forced into a tense dialogue with Cassian, who questions his loyalty and past actions. The conversation turns to Jagdor, Cassian's fallen comrade, and the guilt Ansel carries. With no alcohol to ease the tension, the night is filled with unspoken animosities, leaving Ansel and Cassian on edge. In Chapter 26, Conall and his team stealthily approach the landship depot to sabotage it. They aim to destroy the Eyrie and the main station block to disrupt the Ministry's supply lines. As they navigate the depot's perimeter, Conall's past haunts him, but he remains focused on the mission. After encountering a pair of Phoenix Battalion sentries, they begin their work, planting charges while dodging patrols. Conall is distracted by the screeching of a war eagle, but prioritizes the mission, setting charges that will devastate the depot. As the attack escalates, the charges detonate, and Conall faces an intense moment of clarity as his Shadow Blade is unleashed. He kills his old enemy, Wesley Tarion, in a brutal fight. Afterward, Conall struggles with the consequences of his actions, but manages to free the War Eagle. He flies away, watching the destruction below, but remains shaken by the violence he's just committed. In Chapter 27, Rosomon debates with her generals about the timing of their attack on the anvil. Magar urges immediate action as Armiger reinforcements approach, but Rosomon insists they wait for word from Ulstrom's rebels, hoping for support from within the city. Tension rises as the decision weighs on her. A scout reports an unfamiliar airship approaching the camp, which Rosomon recognizes as the same type used by the witch Wennis of Jubra. Wennis, accompanied by dark-armored knights, offers her help. claiming allegiance to Rosomon's cause in exchange for dialogue between their nations should Rosomon succeed. Despite her anger towards Wenys for previous betrayals, Rosomon cautiously accepts the offer, knowing she has little choice. The chapter ends with Rosomon agreeing to work with Narakis, though she remains wary of their true intentions. In Chapter 28, Fulren, now a changed man after his transformation, struggles with his new monstrous form. He and Verlin approach a camp near the anvil, and after a tense encounter with scouts, Fulren reveals himself as Rosomon's son. They are led to the camp, where Fulren is reunited with his mother. She is shocked by his altered appearance and the artifice that now constitutes part of his body. Though Fulren attempts to explain, his mother is overwhelmed with both grief and concern. The revelation that his brother Conall is dead adds to Fulren's anguish. As they discuss the impending attack on the anvil, Fulren is confronted by Emily, who recoils from him, calling him a monster. Fulren, feeling rejected, decides to leave the camp and continue his journey with Verlin. Despite the painful reunion, he remains focused on the war ahead. In Chapter 29, Conall struggles with the growing influence of a dark power within him, which is manifesting as a deadly curse. He's worried about his friend Donan, who has witnessed his unexplainable actions. As Conall contemplates how to escape his inevitable journey back to his mother, he's interrupted by a scout reporting that Stead has returned. Conall is overjoyed, but soon faces an emotional confrontation with Donan, who demands the truth about Conall's strange powers. In a moment of overwhelming darkness, Conall accidentally kills Donan with a knife, an act he cannot control. Stead, shocked by the scene, is almost killed by Conall in his dark state, but manages to escape. Realizing the danger he poses, Conall flees on the war eagle he had tamed, escaping into the sky as alarms are raised. He's now on the run, desperate to escape the power that controls him. In Chapter 30, Kara, Cassian, and Ansel arrive at a derelict chapel where they suspect Ulstrom's family is being held. Kara is frustrated by the lack of a proper plan and her companion's lack of conversation. After assessing the situation, Cassian leads the attack, while Kara sneaks around the back of the chapel. She sneaks inside, encountering mercenaries, and narrowly avoids capture. When a brutal fight breaks out, Kara is injured, but Ansel arrives just in time to save her, violently dispatching one of the mercenaries. After ensuring the mercenary is dead, Ansel frees the children and Kara rescues their mother. Despite her injuries, Kara is focused on completing the mission. The chapter ends with Kara asking for help with her wound, reflecting on how the mission succeeded despite the lack of a clear plan. In Chapter 31, Tyretta and her group, including Watchhelm, infiltrate the jail to free the Titan Guard prisoners. Despite their rough plan, they manage to convince the guards with forged papers, and after a tense exchange, they release the prisoners. As they load the men into the wagon, a suspicious governor confronts them, threatening to derail their escape. But Watchhelm's quick thinking and a punch to the governor's face buy them time. The group escapes into the night, heading to a safe house where the Titan Guard are fed and rested. Tyretta then speaks to the prisoners, including Cullumcairns, who agrees to help take down Sancton. Ulstrom arrives unexpectedly, and the prisoners, still angry at his betrayal, reluctantly agree to work with him. Tyretta trusts Ulstrom's promise of help, understanding that the Titan Guard's assistance is vital to their cause. In Chapter 32, Ansel returns to camp with Ulstrom's family and seeks permission from Rosomon to leave, but she refuses, reminding him of his past actions. The tension escalates with Ansel being taken back to his cage. There, he converses with his brother, Lugard, who acknowledges their shared guilt for serving Sancton. They discuss their future, and Ansel resolves to go to the anvil to atone for his mistakes. Kara arrives and offers a plan to unite with the Hallow Hills, but Ansel insists on his mission. After Kara frees them from their cages, a disagreement ensues, but Ansel remains determined to head to the anvil. Lugard reluctantly agrees, and they escape. However, they are spotted by a trooper, and Lugard sacrifices himself to allow Ansel to escape. Despite the guilt, Ansel presses on toward the anvil, hoping to protect Grace and find redemption. In Chapter 33, Fulren struggles with his identity and the memory of a woman from Narakis, sensing her presence near the Black Ark. He contemplates the darkness within himself and the changes he has undergone since being cursed. Fulren eventually faces Wenys, the woman he once knew, who reveals she was sent by Queen Merisonk to offer an alliance with Rosomon. She proposes using Fulren's power to assassinate Sancton, believing that his death would bring down the Ministry. Wenys attempts to convince Fulren of his worth and urges him to act independently from his mother. Fulren, torn between his loyalty to Rosomon and the temptation to take action, agrees to the plan. Wenys also warns of a greater threat, the scions of Hyperion Magna, who are preparing for war. Fulren, now more resolved, agrees to unite with Wenys and face the impending danger together. In Chapter 34, Conall arrives at his mother's encampment, seeking answers about his past and his brother Fulren's fate. He is greeted by Olexic Marlock and taken to see his mother, Rosomon. Despite their strained relationship, Conall is eager to help her fight the Ministry. However, he is unsettled by the revelation that Tiretta is inside the Anvil on a mission, which Conall disapproves of. He then meets Fulren, who has undergone significant physical changes after being rescued from Nerakis. Fulren now has metal limbs and a steely resolve, and while he remains confident, Conall sees the burden he bears. They talk about their past, the war, and the uncertain future, with Fulren expressing his doubts about returning to normalcy. Conall's internal conflict grows as he faces the curse inside him and considers his role in the guild's future, while Fulren prepares to assist in the battle ahead. In Chapter 35, Rosomon gathers her generals to discuss the final assault on the Anvil. Despite her pride at having her two sons, Conall and Fulren, by her side, she remains focused on the battle ahead. She plans a small-scale assault on the gates of the Anvil to show their strength, but it will be a ruse. They will make the city believe they have an overwhelming force, using a mock army with help from the Nerakis Knights. Fulren volunteers to infiltrate the mount and kill Sancton, and Conall insists on leading the Nerakis Knights in the attack. Rosomon reluctantly agrees, acknowledging that the plan carries immense risk. If the ruse fails, a full-scale assault will follow. The success of this plan depends on the people of the Anvil joining their cause. Rosomon hopes Tiretta and Ulstrom's efforts will tip the balance. In Chapter 36, Kira struggles with her headache and frustration as she prepares for the upcoming battle. Despite her doubts about the plan, she soldiers on, observing the camp as the troops ready themselves for the ruse. She notices Conall painting his armor and recalls their past encounter. Their conversation reveals Connell's internal conflict, and Kira realizes he has changed significantly since they first met. As tensions rise, Kira decides to join the vanguard, determined to prove her commitment. She confronts Galarena and Vikmar, earning their respect by boldly asserting her leadership and calling for unity among the Hallowhill Guild. Her declaration of defiance against Rosomon and Sancton signals her determination to take what she believes is owed to her. The chapter ends with Kira solidifying her alliance with Galarena and Vikmar, setting the stage for her ambitious pursuit of power. In Chapter 37, Tiretta and Ulstrom watch the city as chaos unfolds after a blue light signals the start of rebellion. Fires light the city, and distant shouts grow into a cacophony of defiance. Tiretta feels both anticipation and dread as they approach the mount, expecting resistance but finding the way clear. Inside, they find the building eerily empty, with no drakes in sight. As they search, they encounter a young girl, Grace, who reveals herself as Sancton's daughter. Tiretta takes her in her arms, but soon Sancton himself appears along with his drakes, trapping them in the temple. Despite Tiretta's threats, Sancton remains calm, revealing his plan to sacrifice everything for the rebirth of the Draconate. As the drakes close in on Tiretta, a mysterious bird's squawk interrupts the tense moments, signaling the arrival of something unexpected. In Chapter 38, Fulren is aboard the Ark, flying over the burning city. He struggles with the dark power coursing through him, now heightened by his necroglyph as he prepares for his mission to confront Sancton. Upon reaching the mount, he lands and fights drakes, using his metal limbs and flaming sword. In the battle, he nearly loses control to the demon inside him, but he remains focused on his target, Sancton, who escapes with his drakes. Fulren is left weakened and confused, but as he attempts to recover, he is forced to follow Tiretta, who has become a formidable warrior, killing a drake in an overwhelming display of power. Fulren feels conflicted about her transformation. Meanwhile, the Ark is attacked, and with the remaining Arcanis falling, Fulren uses his new control over the demon to save the ship, ensuring their escape from the chaos below. In Chapter 39, Conall leads an assault on the Anvil's gates, surrounded by silent knights as they prepare to breach the city. The Stormhulks lay waste to the gates, and the knights charge into the fray, only to face a phalanx of defenders armed with splint bows. Conall, paralyzed by fear, is guided by the knights as they push through the defenses with the aid of green miasma. Amid the chaos, Conall struggles with the demonic whispers urging him to give in to his power. In the thick of battle, he is overwhelmed by the Shadow Sword's influence and kills several defenders in a berserk rage. As he stands victorious, a horn sounds, signaling something Conall can't remember. His allies, the Knights of the Cast, restrain him before he can claim more souls. As sunlight touches his sword, it fades, leaving Conall shaken and consumed by guilt. In Chapter 40, Sholto, a reluctant leader, struggles with the aftermath of a devastating assault where 10 dark knights and their sorcery wreak havoc on the defenders. Amid the chaos, Sholto tries to organize the remaining troops, but morale is low and the city's fate seems sealed. The rioters are growing in strength as Sholto faces the realization that all hope may be lost. Meanwhile, Willett, carrying Grace, tries to protect her from Sanctan, who intends to use her as part of a dark prophecy. Sanctan reveals his plan to bring the Great Worm back to life at Kalur's Fist. Marone leads a rebellious mob against the Ministry, but her comrade Torwyn is killed in the fight. Rearden, lost and powerless, barely escapes the city as chaos and destruction engulf it. Rosomon, leading her army of Maladorn allies, confronts Rearden, accepting his surrender, and moves toward ending the siege. In Chapter 41, Torreta, consumed by the hunt, tracks Laurens through the chaotic streets of Torwyn, drawn to his fear. She is fully consumed by the beast within her, feeling heightened senses as she hunts him down. After a violent encounter with militia, where she savors the chaos, she pursues Laurens into Archwind Palace. When she finally catches up to him, Laurens expresses regret for his actions, revealing his belief in Sanctan's promises for a better world. Torreta, though moved by his words, still sees the devastation caused by their rebellion. As Laurens makes a final attempt to attack her, he loses his footing and falls to his death. Torreta, now wounded, ties a cloth around her injury and reflects on her transformation from prey to predator. As dawn breaks, the city remains in turmoil, with her mother's forces closing in to quell the rebellion. In Chapter 42, Ansel navigates secret tunnels beneath Torwyn, reaching the mount amidst the chaos engulfing the city. As he emerges, he sees the devastation wrought by Sanctan's ambitions. Determined to find Grace, he navigates through the mount, discovering the defiled state of the once sacred temple and the bodies of fallen knights. He learns from Kinloth that Grace has been taken north, and Sanctan plans to resurrect Undamuth, the Great Worm, with a dangerous sacrifice. Despite being too late to catch them at the landship terminal, Ansel presses on, reaching a chaotic street filled with fleeing people. Seizing an opportunity, he overpowers a revocator captain, steals his horse, and heads north, determined to find Grace. He leaves the burning city behind, refusing to give up as he races toward his quarry, still hopeful despite the obstacles. In Chapter 43, Kira leads her forces through the city, clearing out rioters with the help of Stormhulks and Webwaners. Despite her initial excitement over the chaos, she faces challenges when a massive barricade blocks their path to the cogwheel. After some hesitation, Kira orders an attack, eventually halting the Stormhulks when a white flag of surrender appears. A high legate of Sephenodon steps forward, seeking mercy for the people behind the barricade. Kira tries to assert her authority, but Rosomon Hawkspur arrives and takes control, offering the defenders amnesty and securing their surrender. Despite Kira's frustration, Rosomon's charisma wins the crowd's favor, and Kira realizes that her own ambitions are slipping away. The city is being reclaimed under the guild's banner, but Kira feels sidelined as Rosomon takes the spotlight. In Chapter 44, Conall navigates a chaotic celebration in the palace after the guild's victory. Amid the jubilation, he feels disconnected and uneasy, haunted by his role in the city's chaos. He encounters his sister Torreta, who, like him, is disillusioned by the celebrations. They briefly discuss their troubled past and the need to escape, but Conall becomes overwhelmed by his internal struggles and the growing darkness inside him. After a brief interaction with Torreta, he spots his mother and is hit with a surge of uncontrollable rage. Realizing he's on the edge of losing control, Conall tries to escape the festivities unnoticed. He rushes to a side exit, avoiding attention as he flees down dark stairs, determined to seek out his brother Fulren, hoping for a way to rid himself of the curse consuming him. Conall's desperation to escape his fate intensifies as he disappears into the night. In Chapter 45, Rosomon deals with the aftermath of the city's tumultuous victory. She is consumed with worry over Conall's betrayal, but Falco provides updates on the state of the city, confirming that the guilds are in control and cleaning up the damage. Rosomon insists that there will be no clemency for those who sided with the ministry. The conversation shifts to Sancton, whose whereabouts remain unknown. A priest named Willett reveals that Sancton is heading north to Kalur's Fist to attempt a ritual to summon the great worm Undumeth. Despite the doubts of her advisors, Rosomon decides to pursue him. She seeks out an airship, and after a conversation with Wennis and Fulren, they prepare to repair the Ark for the journey. Rosomon is determined to stop Sancton before he can complete his dangerous ritual, leading to a potential new threat. In Chapter 46, Ansel arrives at Wormhead, the last stronghold of the Draconate Ministry, now devastated. He reflects on his past actions and the guilt of murdering his former master, Gilbard. As he ascends the tower, searching for Sancton and Grace, he encounters a lowly legate who reveals that Sancton and his group left the tower the previous night heading north. The legate mentions Sancton's intentions to use Grace for a ritual at Kalur's Fist to summon the great worm, Undumeth. Despite his disillusionment with the faith, Ansel is determined to stop Sancton. The legate offers Ansel warmth and food for his journey north, showing a surprising compassion, despite her loyalty to Sancton. She insists that the worms will decide his fate, but agrees to help him. Ansel, grateful but still burdened, prepares for the journey ahead, knowing Sancton has a head start. In Chapter 47, Fulren works in the engine room of the Ark, trying to stabilize the mechanical system using both artifice and sorcery, despite skepticism from Wennis. After several failures, the engine sputters to life with the help of necromantic energy, but a demon imprisoned within the machine resists. Fulren oversees the artificers as they make adjustments, but their work is interrupted when Verlin visits to say goodbye. She warns him that staying in Torwyn is not a wise choice, suggesting that both the guilds and the ministry are corrupt systems, and that his mother's strength is a facade. Fulren is torn, but Verlin leaves before he can respond. Meanwhile, the engine finally functions, and the Ark begins to rise, signaling a victory for Fulren and his team. However, as he looks for Verlin to share the success, she has already departed, leaving him to contemplate her words and his uncertain future. In Chapter 48, Kira navigates the calm aftermath of the recent chaos in Torwyn, reflecting on the uneasy peace. While walking through the city, she contemplates her role and the uncertain future. She notices Toretta among the workers, helping to rebuild, and confronts her with a mix of apology and ambition. Kira tries to smooth over their past, offering an olive branch, but Toretta responds with physical violence, nearly strangling Kira before releasing her in frustration. Humiliated, Kira continues through the streets, feeling the disdain of the people now taunting her. She seeks out Galarena and pitches a bold plan, to seize control of the guilds while they're weakened and the armigers disarrayed. Galarena agrees, and Kira prepares to make her move, signaling the next phase of her ambitions. In Chapter 49, Tyretta struggles with intense frustration and anger after a confrontation with Kira Hollowhill. She works relentlessly, attempting to exhaust herself and quell her emotions. Stead, recognizing Tyretta's distress, tries to comfort her, but Tyretta remains haunted by the recent events and the loss of her brother. The conversation shifts to Conall, whose sudden violent actions still perplex Tyretta. As the day wears on, Tyretta and Stead head to a tavern where they join Colbert, Lena, and Marone. Tensions rise when Marone questions the true impact of the recent victory, accusing the guilds of perpetuating the same injustices as the ministry. Tyretta struggles with Marone's cynicism, but in the end, she promises to help change things for the better. After leaving the tavern, Tyretta is overwhelmed by nausea, reflecting on Lauren's words and realizing that she no longer feels aligned with the guilds. In Chapter 50, Ansel struggles through a harsh journey up to Kalur's Fist, driven by the need to stop Sancton and save Grace. He reaches the summit where his brothers, fully armed, block his path. Despite their loyalty to Sancton, Ansel pleads with them to stop following him. When he reveals his role in Gilbard's death, Regenwulf, one of his brothers, becomes furious, and in the ensuing struggle, Ansel accidentally kills him. He pushes forward to find Sancton, who is holding Grace. Sancton confesses his pride and vanity before leaping to his death, believing the worms will rise. Ansel rescues Grace, but upon returning, he faces Rosomon and her Teton Guard. She orders Grace to be taken from him, and despite his pleas, Grace is forcibly separated from Ansel. He is bound by the Titan Guard and led away, the storm finally subsiding, marking the end of his journey. In Chapter 51, Rosomon returns to the Guildhall after learning that Sancton Egelrath has taken his own life, leaving no body as proof of his death. As Rosomon addresses her fellow guildmasters, the discussion turns to the fate of those who sided with the ministry, including Riordan, Egilrath, and Ulstrom. While Rosomon calls for justice, her fellow guildmasters, including Mauger and Alexig, argue for mercy, suggesting amnesty for the Armiger battalions and a more lenient approach toward Riordan. They push for Ulstrom to be executed as a symbol of justice for the dead, despite Rosomon's insistence that he acted under duress to protect his family. Ultimately, Rosomon reluctantly agrees to their decision, feeling isolated as her allies assert control. She leaves the Guildhall, burdened by the realization that the war may be over, but the true struggles for power and justice are far from finished. In Chapter 52, Kira Hallowhill prepares to strike against the guilds with her rebellion, using the manufactory as her base. She has a plan involving Stormhulks and Webwaners to take control of the city. However, when she enters the warehouse to check on her troops, she finds herself ambushed by a monstrous metal golem controlled by Rosomon Hawkspur. The creature nearly kills Kira, but she is spared when a mysterious woman, Lucasta Hallowhill, steps forward. Lucasta reveals herself as Kira's mother, thought to be dead, and offers to help Kira in exchange for her loyalty. Rosomon protests, but ultimately agrees to Lucasta's terms, as Lucasta insists on ending the conflict for peace. Kira, though shaken, follows her mother out of the warehouse, uncertain of the future but finding some comfort in her return to the Hallowhill legacy. In Chapter 53, Conall Hawkspur is tormented by the darkness inside him, his mind overtaken by a demonic force. Despite his hunger and desperation, he attempts to flee the city, seeking salvation with his brother Fulren. As he reaches the palace jetty, he encounters his mother, who pleads with him to return and assures him she can help. However, Conall, consumed by anger and fear, pushes her away, unable to reconcile with his past. His sister Toretta and friend Stead try to intervene, but Conall, under the influence of the demon, attacks. He fights with Fulren, now a weaponized demon, in a brutal sword battle. Though Conall overpowers Fulren, he ultimately refuses to kill him, rejecting the demon's control. Despite his defiance, Conall succumbs to the demon's pull, opening a gateway to the lairs and disappearing into it, leaving his family behind. In Chapter 54, Fulren grapples with the loss of his brother Conall, who was pulled into a dark, mysterious gate before disappearing. Despite Wennis's grim prognosis, Fulren remains determined to find Conall. Wennis suggests they seek an alliance with his mother, Rosomon, to prepare for the greater threat posed by the Scions. Fulren confronts his mother, who is still mourning Conall's death, and urges her to unite with Wennis to fight the Scions. After a tense exchange, Rosomon agrees to the alliance, but she expresses concern about Fulren's safety, especially after Conall's fate. Fulren insists on going to Narrakis to form the alliance, believing he can be a bridge between nations, even though he feels like an outcast in Torwyn. His mother reluctantly agrees, and Fulren vows to return. The chapter ends with Fulren's departure, leaving his mother behind, emotionally torn. In Chapter 55, Ansel languishes in a damp, filthy cell, haunted by his brother Conall's death and his own role in the Draconate's downfall. His physical pain matches his emotional torment as he questions the choices he made and whether he could have saved Grace. Rosomon Hawkspur visits him, and though he is resigned to his fate, she offers some comfort, revealing that Grace is safe and with her family. Rosomon acknowledges the loyalty of the Drakes, but insists they must be hunted down for their dangerous conviction. Ansel asks about his brothers, but she confirms they will all be hunted and destroyed. He is told that his death will not be a martyrdom but a private one, far from his former comrades. As Rosomon leaves, Ansel contemplates the futility of his life, the loss of his faith, and his inevitable death, with only the memory of Grace to cling to. In Chapter 56, Rosomon Hawkspur oversees the execution of Ulstrom, a key figure in the downfall of the guilds. Despite the necessity of his death, she is deeply conflicted, plagued by the consequences of her actions. The crowd, though silent at first, erupts into violence as Ulstrom is marched to the scaffold, with stones thrown at him as he meets his end. Rosomon is unable to stop the execution, even though it sickens her. As the crowd cheers, she retreats, feeling detached and empty. Rosomon wanders the city, her mind overwhelmed by loss and guilt. She reflects on her past desires for family and legacy, only to realize they've been taken from her. Eventually, she encounters Darina Egilrath, who condemns Rosomon for the deaths of her family. The encounter solidifies Rosamund's resolve to become more ruthless in the face of the looming threats from Hyperion Magna. In Chapter 57, Tireda watches as her brother, Fulren, departs on the airship, leaving her with a sense of impending loss. She reflects on the recent events, the execution of Ulstrom and her complicity in the brutality, which leaves her feeling disgusted. Tireda struggles with her relationship with her mother, Rosomon, who wants her to stay and help lead the guilds. Despite her mother's insistence, Tireda refuses, feeling she has grown beyond the life her mother envisions for her. She wants to forge her own path away from the obligations of the guilds. Rosamon's pleading and hurt only deepen Tireda's resolve to leave. In the end, Tireda decides to return to Wyke and rebuild her life there, uncertain of her future but determined to make her own choices. This marks her liberation, but also the painful severing of ties with her family. In Chapter 58, Kira walks through the ruins of her childhood home, reflecting on the loss of the Hallow Hills and the devastation she has helped bring. She feels abandoned, both by her guild and by herself. Her thoughts are interrupted by her mother, Lucasta, who emerges from the rain. Lucasta expresses her resolve to rebuild the Hallow Hills and reclaim what was lost, dismissing the recent deals made with the Hawkspurs. Kira is angered by her mother's coldness and betrayal, but listens as Lucasta speaks of reclaiming power, using artifice and sorcery, including the mysterious abilities Fulren displayed. Lucasta reveals plans for a final act to secure her position and demonstrate loyalty, but keeps the details from Kira. Despite their tense relationship, Kira pledges her loyalty to her mother, accepting the daunting task of rebuilding the Hallow Hills, even as they face an uncertain future. In Chapter 59, Darina reflects on the hollow victory of reclaiming her ancestral home, now a symbol of her loss and the destruction caused by the guilds. She struggles with the aftermath of her family's downfall and her resentment toward Rosomon, who granted her reprieve. Darina chooses a new steward for the Hollow and begins to plan her future, but her mother, Lucasta, insists on rebuilding the Hallow Hills with a renewed focus on reclaiming power through sorcery. Lucasta proposes an alliance with Rosomon, which Darina questions. Meanwhile, Willett Kinloth is tasked with convening the selection of a new Archlegate. The High Legates question his authority, but Rosamon's intervention leads to a bloody coup, with Rasakin and Hallinard killed by the Drakes. Rosamon nominates Willett as the new Archlegate, and the High Legates reluctantly accept. Rosamon's control is solidified, and Willett's ascension marks a new chapter in the power struggle. In Chapter 60, Ansel is being transported to a remote fortress, Fort Uthen, for execution. He reflects on his fate, feeling resigned and defeated, with his only regret being his separation from Grace. Once he arrives, he is greeted with hostile soldiers and led to the gallows. However, a letter from Lady Rosamon changes his fate. The officer reads the letter, then orders Ansel's release into the Drift, a desolate area where the condemned are left to die. Despite the brutal treatment and the officer's intentions to gut him slowly, Ansel is set free, given a sword, and sent into the wilderness with nothing but the sword to protect him. The gate is slammed shut behind him, marking the end of his past life and his forced exile into the unforgiving Drift. In Chapter 61, Fulren, aboard a newly modified airship, reflects on the progress he has made in his work, particularly with the engine that powers the ship, no longer relying on sorcery or sacrifices. He is joined by Wennis, who admires the changes, and they discuss the upcoming challenge of persuading the houses and Queen Marisang to accept his innovations. Wennis asks if he regrets his sacrifices, to which Fulren answers no. Their interaction is charged with an unspoken bond. However, their moment of peace is interrupted by the sound of a bell and the appearance of dark shapes in the sky, bandits preparing to attack. Fulren readies himself for battle, donning his sword and helm. With the power of his necroglyphs and the sword's pyrestones, he is prepared to face the bandits without fear, determined to protect the ship and those on board. In Chapter 62, Tireda feels a strange disconnect as she travels home on a landship, reflecting on the changes in herself and the world around her. She is troubled by the recent events, particularly the loss of Conall and the ongoing war. As she converses with Stead, Tireda is unable to share her deeper concerns and retreats to the observation platform, seeking solace in the fresh air and the forest. The beauty of the Alderwood calms her, but she realizes that no matter where she goes, she will always be tied to the guilds and expectations. Deciding she cannot escape the weight of responsibility, Tireda uses her power to stop the landship, then runs into the forest, leaving behind her life with the guilds and her mother. Stead's concern is clear, but Tyretta is resolute in her decision to find her own path. In Chapter 63, Rosomon deals with the aftermath of executing Rearden, facing the fallout from guildmasters, marshals, and the public. Oleksig expresses his concern about the dangerous precedent set by the murder, but Rosomon remains confident that the guilds will comply with their agreements. She introduces Vakhelm, the new guildmaster of Corwin, and Filbert, appointed standing guildmaster of Archwind. They discuss plans to consolidate power, rebuild Torwyn, and deal with the Hallow Hills. Vakhelm presents ore quotas and rebuilding schedules, while Rosomon ensures compliance from all guilds, especially the Hallow Hills, which are under Lucasta's supervision. Willett, now Archlegate, is tasked with gauging public sentiment regarding the recent events. The chapter ends with Rosamon's thoughts on the stability she has gained, but with the looming sense of future upheaval. Rosomon and Grace, her young ward, gaze out at the bustling city, aware that peace may not last. Epilogue. Maelor Catheris waits anxiously atop the Ziggurat of Ciarthanon for the arrival of the Scions, who are late and feuding. The ancient meeting place, surrounded by portals, is a site of dark power and conflict. As each Scion arrives, tensions mount. Sinmanthus, Bagdamegas, Celebri, and Echadiah join him, each with their own disdain for one another, but all share a mutual goal: overthrowing their enemies and securing power. Maelor proposes an alliance across the dominions, suggesting they reach out to even darker forces for help. While some Scions are wary, Celebri, Echadiah, and Bagdamegas agree to Maelor's plan. Sinmanthus, however, warns of a dark warrior destined to defeat them, casting doubt on their path. Despite this, Maelor pushes forward with his plan, determined to unite the Scions and challenge the growing power of Torwyn and Narakis, vowing to secure victory at all costs. 1 year later. A year after the war, Eldon and his nephew Finch trek up a mountain to their boat. Finch, cheerfully singing about the fallen Eaglerath, contrasts Eldon's somber mood, still haunted by the war's aftermath. Eldon reflects on how little has changed, despite the guild's new leadership under Empress Rosomon. During the boat trip, Finch mentions a rogue Drake executed in Millfield, prompting Eldon to recall the horrors of the past. As they fish, Eldon is suddenly dragged into the water by tangled anchor rope and almost drowns. In the depths, he encounters a massive, terrifying creature with a colossal eye, but manages to escape just in time thanks to Finch's quick action. Once on shore, Eldon is shaken by the experience and insists they leave, unable to explain the nightmare he witnessed. As they depart, Eldon remains haunted by the creature's presence beneath the lake. In Chapter 57, Tyretta watches as her brother, Fulren, departs on the airship, leaving her with a sense of impending loss. She reflects on the recent events, the execution of Ulstrom and her complicity in the brutality, which leaves her feeling disgusted. Tyretta struggles with her relationship with her mother, Rosomon, who wants her to stay and help lead the guilds. Despite her mother's insistence, Tyretta refuses, feeling she has grown beyond the life her mother envisions for her. She wants to forge her own path, away from the obligations of the guilds. Rosamon's pleading and hurt only deepen Tyretta's resolve to leave. In the end, Tyretta decides to return to Wyke and rebuild her life there, uncertain of her future but determined to make her own choices. This marks her liberation, but also the painful severing of ties with her family.